So I finally have my hands on a new to me 2021 MacBook Pro 14-inch with the Apple M1 Pro chip in it. It has 32 gigs of RAM installed. And so I thought what I'll do is I'll run the CineBench R23 benchmark test on all of the Macs that I've ever owned. And spoiler alert, the MacBook with the M1 Pro and 32 gigs of RAM is going to beat them all. But the question is, by how much? Is worth the upgrade? So as you can see here on the latest MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro chip in it, there's your score, 12,213. And of course, the higher the score, the faster the machine, the hardware is. Okay. But let's compare this to the first Mac which I bought, used of course, back a while ago. So the first Mac I ever owned was a late 2013 iMac with the Intel i5 3.2 gigahertz processor, 32 gigs of RAM, and your score there is 3045. And then after that, I bought a used 2018 MacBook Pro, 2.2 gigahertz processor, 16 gigs of RAM. Okay, and there's your score, 5751. Let me move this over so we can have some sort of comparison here. Okay, so there's the score. You can see the score. And then I bought a used 2019 Intel i9 MacBook Pro with 64 gigs of RAM. Okay, 64 gigs of RAM. Let's see here. All right, and there's your score, 8783. Okay, remember, this is i9 MacBook Pro with 64 gigs of RAM. Okay, and of course, the M1 Pro MacBook Pro with 32 gigabytes of RAM beat my i9 by quite a margin. I was expecting the M1 Pro MacBook to be faster than the i9 MacBook Pro with 64 gigs of RAM, but I didn't realize the margin was going to be that big. Now, having said all of that, my go-to machine at this point in time, which is June 2nd, 2022, is still the i9 MacBook Pro. Now, if I'm doing just web development, if you're a front-end software engineer, the M1 Pro is fantastic. I wish I've gotten the 16.2 inch one, but hey, I'm lucky to just have the 14-inch. I waited 3 months for this machine to be delivered to me. So for web development, back end or front end, it's fantastic. However, in addition to doing web development, I also do embedded software, and some of the tooling for ARM type devices. It hasn't been ported over to the Silicon M1 chip yet, so most of the toolings are centered around the Intel machine. So that's why I'm still sticking with the i9. Unless I'm doing just purely web development, then I'll go to the MacBook Pro one. Okay, so if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.